Well, how do you replace a star? How do you replace such an important veteran on your team and a leader on your defense? That's what we're talking about on today's edition of Orange and Blue Today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, and replacing Justin Simmons. It's going to be the aggregate, Mace, as we've mentioned, but there's a couple players to really focus on today's show.
Yeah, well, the obvious one is the replacement, Brandon Jones, coming in free agency. But that's not going to be an apples to apples replacement. I think the more interesting elements of replacing Justin Simmons and trying to do it in aggregate are the guys who are the internal options. We won't see Delarian Turner yell until maybe at some point in training camp. He's rehabbing from the torn ACL. But we're already seeing PJ Locke, and we're already seeing JL Skinner. PJ Locke started last year, made a good account of himself. One of the first moves around the new league year was to re-sign him. And JL Skinner, barely saw the field last year, but remember the Broncos thought enough of him to keep him on the 53, even though they weren't going to use him because they're playing the long game with him. And we actually saw him getting some first team run earlier this week when Brandon Jones wasn't there. And I think there's a place for JL Skinner to be in a position where he ends up maybe starting some games this year as at least an injury replacement for either Locke or Jones. Broncos are still high on him.
Yeah, and as we've mentioned multiple times, like watch what they do, not what they say. When they keep Skinner away from availability to other teams via waivers or the practice squad, it's like that's a sign. When they go to Locke immediately, pretty much in earlier this year, it's like, okay, that's a sign as well. Both of these players are coveted, and this team wants to see more of them.
They do. And the other thing also, you still don't have Caden Stearns out there as well. And I think with Caden Stearns, it's kind of like the Greg Dulcich thing in that you're not relying on him being available. If he's in the mix, it's nice, but you better start developing some contingency plans. Maybe that become more of your primary plans. And, Locke certainly re-signed to be a starter, but Skinner, it's more interesting because he had that rookie season where effectively it seemed like he was almost forgotten. Cease. I mean, how many, they had injuries at the safety position, but they would activate. They would activate practice squad guys. They would activate Devin Key to play.
Right.
And JL Skinner wouldn't. And you and I would talk about, hey, is this the week that we're going to see a lot of JL Skinner?
Right.
And it never happened. Part of that was because the Broncos decided very early they were going to play the long game with JL Skinner, coming off of an off season that he spent in injury rehab, and also trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to maximize the physical gifts of this 220-pound, 6'4" guy? Man, he is big when you go up to him.
Right.
He is a presence at safety, but he's still incredibly raw. How are we going to take that raw and smooth it out to where we can find a potential viable long-term safety?
Well, and you mentioned safety. I'm going to play this clip from Sean Payton because not only did they take the long game with him, right? Yeah. What is he? Mm-hmm. And when Payton answers this question, you'll see what I mean. But it's like, is he an Isaiah Simmons type where he's an inside linebacker and a safety? Yeah. Here's what Sean Payton said about JL Skinner.
This is going to be one of those, we talked about this training camp. We're going to see a lot when the pads come on and we're in these team run pass periods. Do we feel like he's better versus the run? Do we feel like he's better versus the pass? I do think he has good instincts. I'd say the second half of last season, even when he's running scout team, we noticed on offense quite a bit. Man, this guy all of a sudden was jumping routes, and he was someone that was, that stood out on the tape. So I think he'll want to build off of that.
Now, Sean Payton also did say he still saw the vision for JL Skinner at safety.
Did he
So
say safety for now? Because remember, was it you? Somebody asked about what's your vision, and Sean said it's still safety, or he said it's safety for now. I think he said it's still safety. So when he used
yes,
those words, Mace, I was like, wait
it's
a second, still safety?
is he thinking about something else potentially?
Yeah, what does that mean? Still safety?
Uh,
It should be safety, right?
I mean, it should be safety, but are you also talking about the type of situation where he ends up, we refer to the Joker on offense, right?
Mhm.
Is he something of a defensive Joker? I mean, they would you see some colleges call it kind of a rover, right?
Rover,
Is
Joker, yeah.
yes. Is that something? Yeah, and the quote was still safety. So
Okay.
you're
Still
trying
safety.
to
Yeah.
you're
Huh?
trying to imply something there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
When he says still safety, I was like, well, what else would it be? Other than side linebacker, rover,
mm,
Joker. We called it a rover, so I'll just say
yes,
rover. But like, what? Huh? I mean, I guess he could be like Isaiah Simmons, who Vance Joseph did coach in
yeah,
Arizona.
yeah, true. Red Rover, bring JL right over. Is that what we're talking about?
I guess so, right? Right. But either
Maybe.
way, it's good to hear his
Mhm.
progress on the scout team. That was important, especially because his coverage. We know he can thump. We know he
Yes.
can do that. But the coverage stuff is very important because it tells me he's diagnosing.
He's learning how to read plays, how to react to them, and serving on the scout team. Now, obviously, there's a very specific kind of role to that, but it doesn't mean that you can't flash and show and show something. You're trying to obviously display and look for the opposing offense, but you also don't. When you're in practice, you don't want the opposing defense to sandbag. You want them to play the schemes, but you want them to make the quarterback think a bit, right? Not
Mhm.
have it be easy. Create something of a challenge, and that's what JL Skinner evidently was doing. And that being said, it was not what he hoped to get from last year. And that was something he talked about, what he learned from going through this. And he talked about this in January, and here's what he had to say.
I mean, of course, I had a different rookie experience than most guys who get drafted, but I really just took it as gratitude. I was able to sit back and learn from Justin Simmons and P.J. Locke and Kareem Jackson and Caden Stearns. So, I mean, of course, you get upset personally because you're not playing, but at the end of the day, they probably have a longer plan for me. And, just being in the position I am to come in with a group of guys like this where it's two All-Pro or two Pro Bowl players in one room, I'm just grateful to really just continue to have this year to learn. I don't never look at it as a down year. I look at it as a year either use it to grow and learn and never let it happen again, or, you're just going to stay the same. And I'll make sure I'm ready for sure.
Yeah, it was funny because he's talking about having those guys that are in the room. He talked a little bit more about them in the course of this interview, but if it's like with Sean Payton, you had 1 year of Justin Simmons, you had 1 year of Kareem Jackson, 1 year with the veterans in the room. And now it's okay. The teaching's done. They've left, and effectively now you're going to tell these young guys, PJ Locke's not all that young. He's been in the league a while, but it's like, okay,
Right.
it's time to see if these birds can leave the nest and fly.
Mm-hmm.
You've got they've taken all they can. Now what do they do? Now are they ready for a bigger role? We talked about it a few days ago with PJ Locke as a potential glue guy and learning how to be a leader. Like he talked about the DB dinners that they'd have. And one of the cool things about those DB dinners is how they include everybody, even the guys that are injured. And PJ talked, hey, I was dealing with a toe injury last year. Remember, he started the season on IR, which is part of why the Broncos were in such a desperate situation in Miami in week 3 at safety, was because they didn't have Locke available. And all the while he's on IR, he's still being kind of kept in the loop, which really helped him when he came back. But now it's PJ helping organize those dinners, right? It's a little bit of Pat Surtain, but PJ is the elder statesman.
Right.
He's the guy that's been around. I mean, of the entire defensive back core, not just the safety core, he's the longest tenured Bronco. In fact, I mean, PJ was there. Gosh, man, you got to kind of look this up here. Is PJ Locke now the longest tenured defensive player?
Wow. Okay. We can look that up and consider
I just
that.
had a brainwave here because remember he came over to the Broncos in 2019, late in 2019 on their practice squad.
Right.
So you start going through their defense here. Yeah. Wow. You know, Baron Browning came over in 2021 in the draft. So did Jonathan Cooper.
Right.
Josie Jewell's gone. You know, you've got your senior inside linebacker is Alex Singleton. On the defensive line, your longest tenured player is DJ Jones is in his third year. You don't have Mike Purcell anymore.
Right.
Yeah. PJ Locke's the longest tenured player on the Broncos defense.
Wow.
Think about that for a moment. That is like, whew. Things happen fast.
They do. They do. When did Jonas Griffith come over? Because he'd be the other one. I'd be like, he's been around a while.
He came over in, I believe it was either 21 or 22. 21.
So
21.
still not as long, right?
No.
Wow.
PJ's December 2019.
Wow. Holy cow.
Didn't that just blew your mind a bit, didn't it? That PJ
Yes,
Locke's the longest tenured defensive player.
Yep.
On this team. I'll bet, wow, people may watch this show, and I know some other media members watch this show, and so I feel like I can't go around and ask people at minicamp next week, hey, who's the longest tenured Broncos defensive player? But that is
something. That's why he's stepping in a leadership role.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
He's been there. He's seen a lot.
He's been there. He's seen a lot, and also he earned the respect of Sean Payton. This is another thing. People talk about who are Sean Payton's guys, and it's like, oh, he's bringing in a bunch of Saints. It's not necessarily just that, though. He's finding his guys here. The glue guys he was talking about a few days ago. Clearly, PJ Locke has become one of his guys, and here's what Sean had to say about PJ.
Last season, I think he began to create that vision for himself, to his credit, and closer to the ball as a pressure player, also in coverage. It's great to see him out there healthy, and I think he earned some of those snaps and the confidence level for him. He's one of those players, when I talk about you see confidence through demonstrated, he saw it, felt it, we saw it, and then it's pretty powerful. And he's smart, he's tough. The first time I remember talking to him a long time about his role was when we were on a plane to go to Justin's father's funeral and his grandmother's funeral, and PJ was on that plane, and we had a long conversation about that. So those are snaps he's earned, and he's put himself in a good position.
Earned is the key word.
Earned,
there.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
He earned it.
Yep.
Now that being said, you earn it, but sometimes it happens. The opening happens because of something else. For PJ, the opening happened with the combination of Caden Stearns' week 1 injury, Kareem Jackson suspension upon suspension, ad infinitum.
Right.
And the thing is, though, you get that chance, and then you earn more chances. Remember, the Broncos reached a point where they just said they're done. Well, we're done with Kareem Jackson. They cut him. Why? Could they do that when they still had, they were still kind of on the fringe of the playoffs? They still had some hope. They could do that because they realized PJ Locke's a good player.
Right.
And he's their future. Kareem Jackson was not their future anymore. And then the other layer to it is with Caden Stearns, effectively PJ played his way above Caden in the Broncos algorithm. Doesn't mean the Broncos still don't have hope for him having a role in there, but because Locke did something well with the snaps he earned. And by the way, remember that moment in the Packers game where Sean Payton was in PJ's grill yelling at him? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You and I talk about this. When Sean Payton is in your face, that means you matter.
Yes. Yep.
He's trying to get more out of you. And I think back to that moment because that was right after PJ Locke came into the lineup and was starting to play. And like, okay, there's some kind of connection between these two because at that moment, Locke is, still, he's still kind of a backup type in a contract year. You're not trying, you're kind of figuring out, okay, what's his role here? And at that moment, you understood that Sean Payton was trying to get more because he believed he was part of the plan. And here we are talking now about PJ Locke being not only the longest tenured defensive player, but maybe a guy who could be team captain on the defensive side.
Yep.
Like he's one of those leaders right now. So this is a moment for PJ. He's got a huge opportunity. Now, that being said, it's a huge opportunity in a moment where maybe it's not going to be as lucrative as it might have been before because with shell coverage all over the place, safety contract values.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were already down. Then they jumped up.
And then
Vic Fangio's defense went. Woo.
This year they've cratered.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's the reason why Justin Simmons is still out there as of this recording.
Exactly. For those, a lot of people watch these shows weeks or months after, so it's almost like we have to say as of this recording all the time.
Time of this recording.
Because these things get out of date. Well, I mean, usually you're watching on YouTube, you can see that, this thing, if you're watching it like in a few weeks, like, this was like 7 weeks ago. So, but yeah, the future at safety, PJ Locke and potentially JL Skinner. Skinner has belief, but he doesn't have the skins on the wall just yet.
Right.
And that's why Sean Payton talking about when the pads go on is interesting because I think with Skinner, more not just when the pads go on, but specifically preseason games or that joint practice against the Packers, he may need to seize that moment with a thump. And it's a thump that he has the ability to execute. But he's going to have to read, diagnose, and attack in order to make that happen. But he's the kind of his equation, I think, may involve that one visceral moment where you're like, oh, okay, this dude's got it, right? Whereas with PJ, it's more the collective as well as how he leads in the locker room, in the huddle, how he gets everybody set up pre-snap, being in the right spot. With JL, it's going to be, are we sitting there watching that preseason opener in Indianapolis and up in the very high stratospheric press box at Lucas Oil Stadium, you can still feel a thump from him from down there on the field. You'll see it and you'll know if it's there.
The moment he's arrived. And Caden Stearns to me is the Greg Dulcich of the safety position. Like, we know he's talented.
Yes.
He's just got to stay healthy. If he does, you got a star there. Now, to wrap up.
But here's the thing, though. He's also in year 4, too.
Right.
And this is another thing. Not only is he injured, he's in his contract year. So it's getting even later early for Stearns than it is for Dulcich, who's still only in year 3 with 2 more years on his rookie deal. So there's even more. I think there's even more urgency to Caden Stearns for him to try to get things right but he didn't practice any of the first 3 weeks, and we haven't seen him out there, so it's rough.
Still safety for J.L. Skinner. So to wrap up today's program, Mace, I will ask you this very gently, because we're not here to blow bubbles. It's not what we do on this show. But I'm going to ask you something. And this is real, right? J.L.'s making plays.
Yeah.
He's making plays on the scout team against Russell Wilson or Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're excited. Hey, coach said J.L. Skinner's making plays on the scout team. He's in coverage. That was on Russell Wilson, not running the offense. Is there something to learn there? And we'd always search out JL, just a little behind the scenes note. You and I, every week when we're thinking is this the week for JL, we would search him out. We, kept in contact with JL when a lot of people forgot about him.
One of the guys we circle back to. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's okay, he was making plays, but what kind of plays would he make this year? He's going against a better either Jarrett Stidham in his second year or Bo Nix running the system.
Running the system, that's the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's sort of the next step on it, is that he makes those plays in practice against something where you see the quarterback holding the ball too long. Then do you see those moments where he's in the right position to make a play against an offense that's operating more on time? Because you get to the game and you get in the chaos of the moment, it's not going to be as designed. It's how can you capitalize off that chaos? So no matter what quarterback you're going against, what offense you're facing, you get pressure from up front, you get the quarterback, the eyes darting a little bit, trying to figure things out, and the errant throw is JL in position to make a play. Or if we're talking about him being that rover type, is he somebody you're creeping up and using on a safety blitz? And that's really intriguing because, again, 6'4" and 220 pounds coming at you, coming full speed is a problem. Admittedly, that's probably what gives J.L. Skinner more chances than some others might get, is you can't coach that size at safety. In terms of frame, there's a little bit of Steve Atwater in J.L. Skinner. And I think that's part of why people were so excited last year, because are there more than 3 players in Broncos history more beloved than Steve Atwater? I'd say not.
Yeah, it was right up there.
Makes everybody feel the warm and fuzzies. Now, safeties can only do but so much in today's game. We went through the year talking about K-Jack and all the times he got fined. K-Jack was a small safety. So he had to compensate for that size, compensate for the loss of a step as he got into year 13, year 14. And that led to some hits that were at least on the edge, if not outright illegal by what the league has defined those standards to be. J.L. Skinner, on the other hand, has a big frame, a long frame. He can make those hits and make that kind of impact while staying more within the framework of the rules. He doesn't have to launch. He doesn't have to go lower his head because he's got a big body that can be a truck and bring people down in a way that remains perfectly copacetic with what the league is demanding today. And that is another reason why you keep giving him chances, because if he can figure out how to read quarterbacks effectively, how to diagnose, there's some high level potential there because of the size that he brings.
You can make those hits when you have that length. And we've made this show a hit. We want to continue making it a hit. But Mace, we need the help of our audience. How can they help us out on YouTube?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss a vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.